Assessment is an ongoing process that arises out of the interaction between teaching and learning. It is a process that should improve not only a student's learning but also a teacher's teaching in a fair way that gives students equitable opportunities to demonstrate what they know using methods and procedures most appropriate to them. My placement school had an assessment culture that placed too much emphasis on testing. By incorporating the IB program into their curriculum, as discussed in the case study, the assessment culture within the school changed dramatically to one that focused more on ongoing formative assessment that is student-driven. However, what works for one school might not work for another. So what is my stance on assessment after researching many assessment policies and practices and now having taught in a handful of school environments? And how will it shape my teaching practice? Assessment will be an essential part of my everyday life as a teacher. It is absolutely necessary for student growth. Formative assessment seems to me to be the most effective form of assessment and one that I believe gives students the best opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of knowledge. Administering a range of formative assessments in the classroom, such as monitoring work, holding student-led class discussions, and providing engaging activities, will allow me as a teacher to assess understanding and student progress. Of course, summative assessment is another form of assessment that has to take place in a classroom through final class discussions, spelling tests, timetables testing, and of course standardized testing such as NAPLAN and PISA. Having now looked more closely at standardized testing within this compendium, I believe that this form of assessment impacts a student's learning growth in a negative way, with students looking to short-term methods for passing a test instead of seeking deeper understanding. Having interviewed a student's parent for my placement school also allowed me to understand the pressure children aged as young as 8 or under leading up to and completing the exam. And of course, let's not take lightly the feeling of disappointment and embarrassment a student might feel if their results are poor. With standardized testing, they cannot measure so many attributes a student offers. The exams do not take into account a person's creativity, effort, or work ethic. Important attributes to have, and some would say just as important as numeracy and literacy. The assessment within the IB curriculum does focus more on real-life skills than the curriculum produced from ACARA. The IB curriculum allows more student-centered study through inquiry-based activities, which is something I would like to incorporate into my teaching and classroom. Enough testing already exists on a daily basis within the classroom. Testing of timetables, spelling tests, and summative assessment through activity sheets hinders the opportunity for a teacher to be more creative. A good assessment culture in school measures the progress of student learning. It is not something that is prepped or crammed for the night before. Having now studied assessment more closely and spent some time teaching and observing inside a classroom, I now realise assessment is such a critical part of teaching and fundamental in the learning process. So focusing on standardised testing, what are some of the pros and cons that this form of assessment provides? The testing does make schools and teachers accountable. Parents, other school communities, and the government can view the results. Standardized testing gives an accurate result of where students and schools are in comparison to other students and schools across Australia. This allows schools to adjust methods used for learning within their school and improve in areas that they had poor results in. Having comparisons to other schools also allows principals and policymakers to see which schools are successful and could potentially employ similar methods to their own education system. However, with standardized testing, the negatives far outweigh the positives in my opinion. NAPLAN, for instance, is held over just one day within a school year. It does not test for creativity, artistic ability, physical education, effort, determination, manners, and other student characteristics such as their interest in learning, their passions, or engagement in learning. Not to mention the testing cannot take into account how much a student's knowledge has improved, their stress, family resources available to the child, location, or disability. Standardized testing also brings the risk of teachers teaching to the test. Results are what matters to some school communities, and achieving a high ranking is some schools' priority. This restricts a teacher's ability to plan engaging lessons that will deepen a student's understanding of a topic. And lastly, another negative impact from testing is the stress it places on the students as young as 8 years old. The mental and physical stress some children experience can affect them greatly, which makes me wonder if it's all worth it. Before I started researching for this assignment, I honestly did not have a stance on assessment within education. Now I realise knowledge and understanding comes in many forms and abilities, and as a teacher, I have to ensure both summative and formative assessment coexist with testing and teaching in more than one form and ability. Regardless of my personal feelings towards standardised testing, it is here to stay. As a teacher, I must embrace my school culture and use assessment for what it is intended for, to improve students' learning in an ongoing process with appropriate formative and summative assessment, and providing constant feedback to students, staff, and parents that will not only ensure student growth but also improve my teaching.